So I want to welcome everyone to MHCR's panel on Insider Reconciliation, in line with this semester's Peace Week theme, Ideas in Action. Very broadly, our panel is going to focus on the Insider Reconciler study that MHCR has been running for a year and a half now, moving from theory, our scholarly contributions, and finally into practice land. Word of warning for all our wonderful attendees out there. The all-star amazing MHCR team is scattered across the world. Unfortunately, that means that sometimes there are technical issues and Wi-Fi outages. So I wanted to preempt everyone that sometimes folks are going to have their videos off. Audio might get a little bit choppy. Some of our staff might fall out of the presentation and come back in. So just wanted to set that expectation up front. We're going to have about an hour-ish of presentation, maybe a little bit less, depending on if one of our speakers is able to make it. Then we're going to move into a Q&A facilitated by the USIP superstar, Carl Stauffer. Thank you, Carl. So we're going to be getting to questions in the chat and any other more audio questions at that point in time. So over to you, fearless leader Antti. Get us started.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you everybody who has been working hard to make this event happen. And I just want to share first that I'm calling from the Russian border in Finland, and we have about 13 feet of snow in front of our window here. The house I'm calling from doesn't have electricity or running water, so my life is dependent on the sustainability of the iPad battery. It doesn't always cover all the Zooms that I need to go through. But I wanted to also wear the special sweater because this is when my dad was doing field research among the Sami indigenous peoples. And I, as a small kid, was running in his feet and causing trouble. So there might be some background noises. My sons are here with me this time. And so the generation work is continuing. But by listening to those Sami healers and reconcilers, it really shaped my worldview. And today, when the Finnish government and the Sami people are working on truth and reconciliation process, I know that eventually it is up to these healers to find out how to heal their people. It may be very different what it looks like when they are working in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but one day they have to step up and lead that process as they have been doing for centuries. I have had the true honor of being involved in the Carter School at George Mason University now for almost 2.5 years by establishing this Mary Hogue Center for Reconciliation. And it has been a true honor to be in one of the most distinguished schools and understand that the school has interest and curiosity in this concept of Insider Reconcilers, because this idea is the main research question that the MHCR has taken upon itself. And we will be producing really significant studies over this topic in the coming years, including PhD theses, but also smaller research publications, hopefully books, to introduce this. And I'll just a little bit speak about the philosophy and the background of this concept. Because in peace mediation, we often see that when there's a parties of conflict, somehow a third party appears in the center. And there has been a lot of attention on these mediators, especially in the UN realm. In the role of diplomacy, we give a lot of attention to these mediators. But also in a smaller scale, when we look into legal mediation, for example, when they apply restorative justice in resolving disputes before they go to court, there is a signed legal mediator between the parties. And so this idea of a mediator has been influencing even of those more transformative methods. However, what we have witnessed in the world is that these peace agreements are not holding, they're falling apart. And therefore, we have to dive much deeper into understanding what is the process that has to happen between the parties themselves. And parties that have been fighting each other, who have been fearing each other, who have been inflicting violence towards each other, it's just a really hard and complicated process. And by calling and signaling and focusing on the insider reconcilers, we recognize that within the parties, there are some individuals who are able to make that connection, almost like rewiring brain tissue, that there needs to be the first contact that starts to flow information, emotions, connections, and realign the parties. And we also want to understand the more incremental process of the parties, how they can move the reconciliation forward. But the first contact happens through those insider reconcilers. And they're often in a lot of pressure, sometimes under danger, under threat, being excluded, or that they may even be killed for what they do. So we have wanted to recognize and honor these insider reconcilers, but also to help to reshape this field. So MHCR has an ambition that through this research, will be providing something significant and practical, and by this way model also how the research that we do can feed into practice. And I've been just so thrilled and honored to see this incredible commitment that you all will see from our students. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Oakley. Thank you, Bell. Thank you, Cam. And thank you, Hannah, for all you have done in this research and continue to do. What we have wanted to do also from the beginning is that we are guided in this process by true insiders. So one of the philosophy of MHCR has been to invite leading insiders into fellowship, and we are just so thankful for you, Rowda Olad, who is joining from Somalia, and Tecla Namachanja Wanjala from Kenya. Not all what you have done, but what you continue to do with us, so that we can learn by observing, working with you, and also hopefully in the future doing more research on the way you are operating, to bring that knowledge into global awareness and help shape our understanding of the roles of insiders, who are not just working at the community level, but then also are influencing the whole national process, as in your both cases you have been. Finally, I wanted to express my gratitude to my dear friend and colleague at US Institute for Peace, senior expert Carl Stauffer. Carl is a true hero in the field of transitional justice. He's been doing field work more perhaps than research, but he's also a true academic. And having somebody like Carl with such an insightful understanding in the significant institution at USIP, it gives us a lot of hope, because he will help to translate, and he's already helping to translate what is the work that Tecla is doing and Rowdas are doing and the communities are doing for state level actors. Because what we have seen is in the state level and among the funders, a lot of lack of understanding of this kind of significant work. And if Carl succeeds, which we hope he will, and we'll do everything we can to help him, there'll be further funding flows for the insiders and their especially significant role. My final note is that Nick Sherwood, who has decided to do his PhD on this topic, is also focusing on the well-being and resilience of the insiders. So amidst all of those pressures, how can you sustain your energy, your strength, and can continue to do your work is something we want to understand. And thank you, Nick, for choosing that topic. We find your research extremely timely and significant. So thank you, everybody, for joining and being part of this process. And I look forward following all the presentations and conversations. Back to you, Nick.
Great. Thank you so much, Antti. And Cam, over to you to tell our audience participants a little bit more about MHCR.
Hey everyone, can you guys see my screen? Cool. All right, guys. So this is the MHCR annual report. This is just work that we have conducted over the past year and some change, and we'll just go through this a little bit to provide some context into the work that we've done. So this is our mission statement. The goal is to bring leading reconciliation experts and scholars together to both research reconciliation practices and develop the impact of ongoing and future reconciliation processes, which is how we were able to bring together this panel full of experts in the field and everyone who has contributed to bringing this to life. And this is also mentions our namesake, Mary Hope, who was a pioneer within the field, and we continue to honor her memory with the with the work that we do. So after last year, after the murder of George Floyd, we kind of shifted some of the work that we've done. We started conducting some work within the US, and this was an article written by myself, which talked about some of these initiatives and the work that we've done and why we felt that we needed to shift from, not just being an international organization to also bringing some of our practices and expertise into our own backyard. Okay, and speaking of conflict in our own backyard, one of our senior research professors, Eduardo Gonzalez, who has worked on truth commissions all over the world, Peru, in Africa, and so he had helped establish one within Iowa in the US, and also he has been working on a transitional justice course in the US for those who want to help establish truth commissions. These are some of the local initiatives that we've taken part in, and we also have we've moved beyond the US, doing some international reconciliation work. Okay, and so Antti specifically, we've been working closely with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Finland. As Antti mentioned, that's where he is based, and we've taken a lot of expertise from them and also helped that to inform some of the reconciliation practices that we have done. We've also conducted work in Alaska and Myanmar in developing peace-building leadership skills. Okay, and these are our Insider Reconciler fellows, which you will get to meet two of them later. As we mentioned before, Dr. Tecla Namachanja Wanjala and Rowda Olad will be participating. And we also have Ms. Betty Bagombe, who is based in Uganda, but they will talk more about their work throughout the presentation. So sustaining peace building, social healing, and transformation. We've launched multiple initiatives over our time as a center, such as the Think Peace podcast, which was helped produced by myself and Colette Rausch, another one of our senior research professors. We have also published NeuroPeace, which was edited by Colette Rausch, and it's an online open source series focusing on research and practice at the nexus of neuroscience and peace building. And the community of practice, which also brings together leading practitioners, scholars, and students aimed at advancing a cultural shift where leaders of social transformation center individual and collective transformation efforts to build more inclusive and just societies. And these things are all a part of our social healing and transformation, and they're focusing on the impacts. They're very trauma informed. And the Think Peace podcast also had Dr. Tecla Namachanja Wanjala on there. Okay, so this is our TRL, which leads our flagship Insider Reconciler study, which is led by Nick, and also has Bell and Oakley, who are some of the integral members of the team. Also Hannah Adamson, who was on the call as well. So we'll talk about the Insider Reconciler project. We've also done the impact of COVID-19 on religious leaders and communities, and approximating expert knowledge of reconciliation models and methods, and an evidence review for USIP. Oh, and I forgot to mention also the TRL has done 21 conference presentations, 2 publications, has received over $150,000 in external grant funding, and we have 5 research products to date. Also, some of the other things that we've done, we've launched the MHCR webinar series. We've had 5 webinars, over 2,000 registrants, 14 organization partners, and 600 plus YouTube views, which has gone up since this was last posted, and we've had over 37 speakers. Yes, our webinar series, they mainly focus on connecting change makers, working towards truth, healing, and racial justice, as well as transitional justice and multiple other topics which we've led webinars on. And also one of the main cores of MHCR is the student leadership. We have a lot of mentors who help provide us with information to move towards a better future for the field of peace building, and the students are very much empowered to take what they've learned from their mentors and take that into practice. Okay, so our research helps to redefine reconciliation. So some of these traditional peace building models hinge on the role of the third party, individuals and organizations who are not native or indigenous to a given conflict context. And when the field was first developed, leaders in our field believe third party interveners may be neutral and impartial within conflict contexts, giving these actors an ability to remain more objective and clear-headed during peace building processes. But over the years, we've learned that this has changed, and working within these fields is, it's hard to necessarily be impartial. People have to have a vested interest in wanting to see these things into fruition. And this is where our Insider Reconcilers come in. And these are some of our partners. We also have a quote from Dr. Carl Stouffer, who is on our call. And these are just some anecdotes from the team. We're glad to be a part of the team, and just our approach in building the center into what it is today. We haven't even made it to 3 years yet, but we've made a substantial impact within the field of peace building, and we're looking forward to seeing more of what we can do over the next few years. So these are some of our donors, and this is how you can support MHCR. And this is our wonderful team, some of us are on the call, some have moved on, but yeah, this is the MHCR team. So thank you guys.
Great, thank you, Cam. And if you can bring up the slide deck, that would be great. Over to you, Hannah. Are you able to join in via audio?
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with everybody on the call. I am the program officer at MHCR and also a student in the accelerated master's program at the Carter School. I do want to apologize for having my video off, but for limited Wi-Fi reasons, I will be keeping it off so that I can continue to hear and speak with you all. Before I jump into things, I do want to take a moment to recognize the wonderful presentation of the report by Cam, and also the beautiful way it's presented in that report, which was lead author Marisa Maddox, our grant development coordinator at MHCR. And she couldn't be on the call today, but she passes on her best, and I just wanted to recognize that. So now jumping a little bit into our Insider Reconciler study and a little bit more about that program. I'll be talking a bit more about what an Insider Reconciler is and what the criteria for somebody might be. So this was a topic first explored by Lederach and Ware in 1991 in the exploration of the Nicaraguan peace processes throughout the 1990s. And it was originally discussed as an insider partial, as somebody who already has a connection to the conflict going on. And oftentimes they were talking specifically about insider mediators bringing two different parties together in the process. So now we're looking at a subsect of the insider partials, insider reconcilers, people bringing together, people bringing parties together after violence has occurred. So these people often have connection and existing trust built with one or more parties in conflict, often meaning that they too are part of those parties, and they are able to have additional credibility because of these relationships built within the conflict context. Additionally, these people continue to live in the conflict following the peace processes. So this gives them an additional stake in whatever process is going on, because they too have something to gain or lose in being able to overcome the negative cycles of violence and conflict. So if we move to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about the potential benefits and risks of this approach. So for potential benefits, apologies, I was just lagging on the slide there. I've got it now. The potential benefits include having a deeper understanding of the conflict and its entry points. So as somebody living day in and day out in the conflict context, Insider Reconcilers are more adept in identifying people that we can connect with, processes that can be constructed within the cultural dynamics of the conflict itself in a way that an outsider may not be able to perceive initially. And in a similar way, they can improve information flows between the two or more parties in conflict, but also with any external mediators coming in, NGOs, government organizations, and authority figures. So in this way, they're dispersing information both horizontally and vertically within the conflict. Insider reconcilers often champion locally designed solutions, again, as they understand and are part of the cultural dynamics and unique needs of the conflict situation. They are able to develop things that are uniquely attuned to those specific needs and also create sustainable community long after outsiders have left. However, this does not come without its share of potential risks. So being an insider reconciler often means that you are working within a conflict context before anybody has recognized the work that you're doing. And it means that you're working informally and bringing people together, often before there's resources there to support you. So this can be particularly challenging, and I'm sure maybe our Insider Reconciler fellows will speak to this later. And an additional risk is that whenever funding or connections with external parties to help the peace process come in, there's the risk of being overpowered or overshadowed by external actors working to implement their own solutions that potentially have not consulted Insider Reconcilers and the existing work already happening on the ground. Furthermore, insider reconcilers may be negatively influenced by the problematic power dynamics of the conflict contexts. So if there is power imbalance, gatekeeping, corruption at local government levels in the conflict itself, insiders may be limited in the capacity that they are able to implement their solutions. And furthermore, while, as we talked about at the beginning, insider reconcilers have a much deeper understanding of the conflict itself, they may not have a comparative knowledge that an outsider may have from working in, say, 5 different conflict zones and being able to compare and contrast what worked in each unique situation. So that is just kind of one of the trade-offs that comes with it. It's a very, very quick snapshot from this topic that's originated from 1991 onward till now. And we're really working to understand this more by actually connecting with insider reconcilers, which is something that no other study has done to date. And to talk to you more about that, I'm going to pass it off to Bella and Oakley. Thank you.
Great. Hello, my name is Oakley. I've been the lab manager at MHCR now for a little while. So I'm going to talk just very briefly about the methods, and then I'm going to turn it over to Belle to talk more in depth about the analysis. So the research question, I decided to put it right here at the top, is what are the experience of insider reconcilers currently engaged in transformative reconciliation processes in conflict contexts? So I feel like Auntie gave a pretty good introduction, and Hannah, thank you very much. Hannah did a fantastic literature review about insiders. So also thank you for adding the citations. That's some helpful stuff. So the way we've been collecting data is through a purposive snowball sampling method. So we begin with our own network, people that we are aware of, and we invite them to be participants in the study. And then from our immediate network, we're interested in going out and deep. So what I mean by that is going out into new contexts. So far we've interviewed insider reconcilers from Myanmar, Burma, Kenya, Libya, the United States, and Finland. We're also interested in going out into new contexts as we become aware of more insider reconcilers, and then also going deeper inside in a particular context, just learning more about, inviting more participants in any of the contexts that we've found insider reconcilers previously. And then once one has agreed to participate in this study, we conduct a qualitative semi-structured interviews over Zoom. For those interested in qualitative methods, what's nice about doing it over Zoom is you don't have to fly there. That's a big plus. It saves a lot. That saves us a lot of money. And then there's also an added bonus when you move to transcription. Zoom transcribes things not very well, but it does transcribe them. And if you're a little clever about it, you can save yourself a lot of time on the back end with transcription. So that's nice. These interviews cover 3 themes. I'm not going to get into these because Belle will get into them in more depth. But we ask insider reconcilers about their conceptualization, how they're conceptualizing and operationalizing the term reconciliation. So what does reconciliation mean to them? Their experiences facilitating reconciliation processes. We're very interested in that. And then also we're very interested in this well-being aspect. What is the impact of reconciliation processes on their well-being? And then a second question that goes along with the practice end of MHCR, and how can we support them? How can we add value? How can we support them as they're engaging in peace processes? So with that, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to Belle.
Thank you, Oakley. Hi, everyone. I go by Belle. I'm originally from Albania. I grew up in Italy and the US. I'm calling in from North Macedonia. I'm a PhD candidate at the Carter School, and I'll be speaking a little more about the analysis for the INREC study. So as you can see from the slide, the qualitative method we're using to analyze data, it's a pretty common used one. It's a thematic analysis. And we choose this so that we can specifically study those units of meanings that are produced by people in relation to events and within their environments. So then primarily, we're interested in thematic analysis as a flexible tool which helps us to see perspectives, a perspective of another person, as well as make sense and connect information that may not seem related. And so in other words, we're looking for patterns here, right? We're digging down on each interview and seeing if there are patterns. Specifically, I'm one of the newest members here. I joined in January. So I started by doing this by coding. For the purpose of this study, coding it's being done manually, although there are softwares out there. Simply put, coding is done by assigning codes to words, sets of words or sentences. And so coding it is a bit of a fancy way of saying assigning a number or a letter. Most commonly, it's a number to these to data, and by data we mean information provided by the participant. Some general guidelines here that we've been using with the first 10 interviews that we have analyzed and coded. They provide us this wonderful overview of what could be of what is really a foundation for future interviews. Another guideline that it's useful for us as we do this is using these 3 clusters that Oakley and Hannah have mentioned. This slide is more of an example, but so our 3 clusters are understanding reconciliation. Second is the role of insider reconcilers. Third one, well-being in reconciliation practices. And so coding is basically I take an interview, I have it in front of me, and the very first thing I do is I scan it in its entirety so that I can be familiar with what's in front of me and the direction of it. And then second, I do what I mentioned just a minute ago. I give a code to either words or a collection of words, or even paragraphs sometimes, really. I'm guided in this by knowing what questions belong to which cluster, right? So within each cluster, then I have themes and even sub-themes, of course. Direct outcomes from this kind of analysis really is a number of things. I can mention at this time with an example here in the slide. It's, of course, we'll have a collection of all participants' coded responses, which will be organized by themes and clusters. Of course, also a report on all themes as well as prevailing ones, right? We want to see, for example, our the information we gather, if it really falls within some of the expectations we have, right? And of course, the second part there, highlighted in red at the bottom there, that's an example of how it will look, the Excel spreadsheet collection, right? And so you see those three clusters, each cluster has a theme of what that particular participant is speaking about, right? So the Excel spreadsheet just has a lot of numbers, but if I can share my screen just very briefly, am I able to share my screen?
You should be able to. I made you co-host.
Thank you. I just wanted to share this story because for me, this is what analyzing all of this means. So I think you can see it, right? Basically, what we're doing is we're following, you know, you may think that you're following 1, 2 threads, but then you see how it's connected to another one and so on. And then at some point you do some, you zoom out, right? Or zoom in as you choose, and you see how things are connected. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Bob. All righty. You go to the next slide, please, Cam. Right, so y'all have heard from our team who we are, sort of the birth of the Insider Reconciler study, moved through the pilot phase. So we've got 10 interviews done, aiming to have another 15 to 20 done by end of this summer. Where do we go from here, right? We've done the analysis. We're now in the midst of write-up. Part of the ethos at MHCR, and I think the Carter School more broadly, is that we're not satisfied with just putting journal articles or books kind of into the ether, right? There needs to be some sort of a practical impact on the field. So while the study has been taking place, we have allowed insights from our Insider Reconciler study to supplement, to guide, to shape various practice initiatives being done at MHCR. Briefly touching on a few of those things, USIP, thank you, Carl, for the funding. USIP is contracting us to contribute to technical manual or some sort of publication that's going to go on to empower USIP staff. One of my big goals for this publication specifically is for more formalized peace building employees, so folks who would work at USAID or USIP. I would like for them to be able to recognize, one, who insider partials, insider reconcilers are, and how to support their unique needs. I think that infiltrating insights from this study into large-scale peace-building organizations is a really, really good way to sort of distribute the insider reconcilers' knowledge and wisdom. Moving on from there, the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has, as part of our ongoing grant with them, working on reconciliation in the Horn of Africa, we're co-constructing an online open reconciliation portal. So this is going to be sort of a compendium of resources for reconciliation practitioners, scholars, and students. Many sort of bite-sized quotes from our Insider Reconciler interviews are going to be able to populate the website. Some of our participants said basically, hey, you can use my interview data however you want. You're feel free to use my name on any of the publications that come out of this. So that data is going to be able to go to inform. I'm particularly excited about the students. They can look up and say, oh my gosh, here's a direct quote from someone who's doing the work that I want to do, the kind of work that I want to do in the future. Moving out of the sort of the broad INREC idea into my bailiwick, which is the well-being and resilience component of all of this. In fall of 2020, Professor Mark Gopin and I co-taught a course on well-being and peace building, which I want to thank the Carter School for allowing us to put that course together. Served a few different purposes. One really cool purpose it served for me was as a sort of a pedagogical experiment. When you take a group, and I'm talking about Carter School master's students predominantly, when you have a group of 10, 15 master's students who are all interested in the peace building field, what are the most important lessons about well-being promotion, about resilience building that we can teach them? One thing I would like to see in all graduate programs focusing on peace building, conflict resolution, is a required course on how to take care of ourselves once we're in the field, especially for insiders who are seen sometimes by folks in their own communities as traitors. They're often walking between cultures, between conflict sites, between worlds. That can produce a massive psychological burden. And so I believe to make the peace building field, to make insider reconciliation more sustainable, we have to be really, really honing in on how to support the health, well-being, mental health of insider reconcilers. As Auntie mentioned before, I recently pivoted my dissertation project to do a follow-up research on focusing specifically on resilience building within Insider Reconcilers. So I've got Karina Crosslin and Dan Rothbard on my committee, and we're working together to figure out how we can build typologies of resilient peace builders. What are the different resilience building strategies peace builders already engage in, Insider Reconcilers already engage in? We can identify those strategies. Then the idea is we can craft workshops, trainings, coursework, etc., to play to the character strengths of these individuals. I think that's it. So Cam, let's go to the next slide. We have two amazing, incredible, show-stopping Insider Reconcilers that are part of the MHCR team. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Rowda Olad, we are ready for you when you are, sister.
Thank you, Nick. Greetings of peace. And I think it's Ramadan, so I'm hungry. If you don't hear my voice, you can let me know. And thank you. It's great to be here with you all, and thank you for inviting with me to be part of this very important Peace Week event. I think both Auntie and Nick mentioned about the importance of fieldwork and the practical lessons to combine with the theories we learn in the classroom. So therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to share with you a recent clan violence that took place in Galmudug region in Somalia, where I also happen to be as an insider reconciler to get involved the mediation of the two wiring body. So I hope we can all find this story. Also, of course, it's a sad story, relevant to our work as insider reconcilers and as international peacemakers. Nick, can you all hear me clearly? Just to check my mic.
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I just didn't put on the video because I'm worried about that might slow down the internet. So in February, just last February in this year, I was in the middle of my campaign for the position of member of the parliament in Somalia. By the way, I was not successful in the election. I didn't make it. So I received a call from colleagues in Columbus, Ohio, who need my assistance in de-escalating violence between two clans in Galmudug region. So this is the story. So I want you to follow on this story because I'm trying to bring field work to our conversation. But also it's very complex to understand, But what I will do is I will simplify and I will highlight the key areas that touch my heart during my work in Galmudug region for this specific incident. So, a man from Clan C, there is this involves on two clans, so I label it, so bear with me. So a clan from Clan C, a man from Clan C killed a man from different clan in the region, which we can call as a S clan. So the S clan came out and they revenged by killing a college student from the region from Clan C. If you don't understand, you can later ask me questions about this. So that is why my colleagues back in Ohio, who are relatives to the first man that got killed, reached me out since I was that part of the country about because the killing will have been continued without intervention. So they asking how I can assist on this. So it was important also to seek the intervention of the traditional leaders, and usually those kind of cases traditional leaders deals with. But this was kind of like killing each other. There was no dialogue or any negotiation on the table for somehow. The tension was too high. But what was very interesting on this case was being involved as a female on this case, particularly a place where I couldn't get elected because of being women, was what was even making different on the case when I look back. But deep in my mind, I also thought about a number of things that associates around this issue. The first one was what I needed to initiate engagement between the two warring clans so that they could sit down and to pay what commonly we call as Somalis dio, which means blood money. I reached out both clans and I tried to be familiar with the situation. So I think Hannah was talking about insider reconcilers versus outsider reconcilers. But sometimes as insider reconcilers, some situation you will also see yourself as an outsider reconcilers. So I took time to get familiar with the situation. And what I learned is apart from history of prior killings on these two clans, it came to conclusion unless the clan S, which the clan that killed the young college student as a revenge, moves forward with some traditional demands, no engagement will be possible to happen. So therefore, I investigate and I call several traditional leaders of Clan C to understand what are the demands in place to initiate the dialogue between the two clans. So the Clan C that had lost of its member had drawn up a list of 4 demands. One is a gun, which was worth $1,400. And the second one was $1,000 as a penalty for the murder. And another point was, the third one was $1,000 for burial. And the fourth one is a young girl. So they put in place for those 4 conditions. So that's one thing. The second thing that got stuck in my mind was the cause of the killings, which is only clan association. So there was no any other reason. One get killed and the other get revenge. And this will go on, and that's how it leads conflict between clans and killings each other. And what is more scary was the traditional leaders of the Clan C called me and they say the young man in the clan had sworn if the case does not get settled, they will retaliate by also killing a member from the other clan. And here, poor Rowda, as an outside reconciler on this situation, I'm listening all these things which I could not comprehend when compared to my experience. Yes, I'm Somali and I'm involved on different reconciliation process, but this case was completely different. It was a deep in different region and completely different areas of my comfort zone. And of course, I couldn't handle to see more killings within the region. So it was a nightmare. So it was very sad. The other sad part of this story was both families who have lost their loved ones only entitled a very small percentage of the money, and they receive either the blood money or the other engagements. But the saddest of all of them was the use of the exchange of the young girl to bring peace between the two warring clans. And the Clan C, when I spoke to them, they made it clear for me, this is what we have done in the past. This is how we have solved our differences, and this is how we did the exchange. So this is just the initial engagement, but also the deal could be over 50,000 or 100,000 later on. But the initial engagement to de-escalate the violence, these are the 4 requirements. So I try to learn more the reasons of using the young girl, and they say exchanging the young girl will lead to some level of peace between the clans, even though it was not guaranteed that they will stay forever peace. So I told the traditional leaders of the danger of such practice, which indeed was their part of their cultural part for bringing a peace. So what I did is I offered them a total of $3,000 with the support of my colleagues in Ohio. So I told them, okay, here is the deal. I will, instead of traditional leaders going back to the clan and collecting money and all these things, especially this kind of time that the region suffers a drought, I will offer for you to pay this amount of money. But in exchange, what I need is not to use as part of the negotiation of the young girl to bring peace between the clans. So it was no ghost song for me. So, and what also helped me is my understanding of the local cultural context, helping me because that's what the traditional leaders understand. So in the process, also my skills as a peacemaker and mental health practitioners were very useful in the persuasion and engagement of the elders. So at the end of the story, they took my proposal and we made agreement using a young girl means of peace should not be part of the negotiation. So that was good. As an insider and outsider reconciler, this experience made me feel the need to study further and explore this old practice of using young girls to settle conflicts. The community also needs to understand that exchanging one life for another is not the best way to maintain a harmony, because it also violates the rights of women, which they need to understand on women's perspective and as a community as a whole. So also, if you look on the other side today, there are many international international and local organizations that work in Somalia and many other parts of the world doing a peace building and communal, even higher level of engagement of peace building work. But in most cases, a lot of attention is not given to how African communities, as they are traditionally set up, or solve their conflicts. As an insider reconciler, and I think Tecla will also explain more, we often invited to facilitate this kind of reconciliation meetings, but in some instances, the deeper and the underlying issue are not recognized. So in this case was an eye-opening for me as an insider reconciler, and I feel like I need to be involved even more to be able to create that desired impact in the communities. And my plan is to bring such clans together in a human way so they can make a commitment towards peace within their community and personalize the killings and practice and help them understand how this impacts them as an individual, as a family, as a whole. But also, I think what will change the perception is on that region specifically in GMU will be as a female peacemaker to be involved in these very serious cases. I hope that will also change the perceptions that they believe against women. So I would like to create a documentary that sheds more light on some of these issues and help both insiders and outsider reconcilers approach similar situations. But most importantly, we must continue to educate communities about the danger of conflict and the benefit of living in harmony. And also we need to keep in mind this type of work, of course, requires time, resource, and expertise, but we can do one at a time. And I'm really honored and really appreciate the work that students at George Mason and Mary Hawk Center are doing on this work that's very relevant of my life and our life around Peace Builders work. So I would like to hand over to Tecla, and I think part of who I am and everything, I think that introduction has been made already. So I skipped on that part. So I hand over to Tecla. Dr. Tecla. Hello?
Thank you. Thank you, my sister Rowda, for that inspiring presentation and the case that you've handled. I really appreciate that. I don't know if my voice is also clear from Nairobi. Testing, testing.
We hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Thank you. When I looked at the question that was presented to me, and I looked at the emails, there were no specific questions. I looked at the emails, and I chose to narrow my presentation to 3 questions. How I conceptualize intergroup reconciliation as an insider reconciler, again using a case study that I used some time back. I will also look at the strategies that I used, that I found useful, and then look at the last question, the challenges that I may have faced physically, emotionally. And the starting point, I must say that the questions sent me down the memory lane. And if I was to write a book, that is what I would have called it, Down the Memory Lane. The next title, I'll have called it Called, Qualified, and Commissioned. So, to the question, how do I conceptualize, or how did I conceptualize reconciliation, intergroup reconciliation at that time that I intervened using this case study? If I was to define what I was doing, I would have said that finding a lasting solution to the problems affecting the 2 communities that were in a conflict. The case study I am using is the time when I was the Relief and Rehabilitation Coordinator for 40,000 ethnic clashes. And so, as the person in charge of relief and rehabilitation under the church, my role was mainly to alleviate the suffering of the internally displaced victims, to find solutions to their problems. And so I ensured that we had food in the camps. I ensured that we had functional structures in the camps who could help us manage the camps. There were about 80 major camps of 40,000 internally displaced victims. we ensured that we were the voice of the victims, because at that time that we intervened during our first clashes in 1991-92, the government denied actually that we had IDPs when we had over 300,000 all over Kenya. In the region where I worked, we had 40,000. So I had to be the voice of the internally displaced victims of ethnic clashes. And I did all I could to update my boss, who was the bishop of the Catholic Church where I was working. So this was my role. And around this time, what I should mention, this was way back in 1991, 1992, Kenya was an island of peace, surrounded by our neighbors, affected by drought and violent conflict, looking at Ethiopia, looking at Somalia, looking at Sudan and Uganda. So this is the time that we did not have terminologies like peace builders. By then, we only had 2 organizations that were working in the area of peace building, but they were all looking outside Kenya. People for Peace in Africa and Nairobi Peace Initiative. So when we had this major challenge after the introduction of multi-party politics in Kenya, where our first general election, elections were accompanied by violent conflicts, the people that came in to support were mainly from the church and religious institutions and local community-based organizations. The professions that the leaders from the churches looked to support were those from social work, development, teachers, and nurses. I just happened to have completed my diploma in social development, and that is how I was invited to support the internally displaced victims of clashes. So I worked, my initial work was supporting relief. But as we continued supporting relief, we reached a place where we were fatigued, the donor fatigued. 3 years down the line, we've been providing relief with the support of donors, religious institutions. They got fatigued. It reached a time we did not have enough food in the camps. We did not have enough medical medicine in the camps. So malnutrition was very high in the camps. And like in all conflicts, whenever there is a conflict, we have both groups affected. So as I was serving majority IDPs who are evicted from this region, I used to go to the region where they were evicted from, also to serve a few from this community. For lack of a better word, we called them perpetrators. Then while there, I also noticed that it's not just the IDPs in the field that were frustrated, but even them, because most of the schools where they were taking the children for studies were in the area of their so-called enemies, where IDPs were. Most of the good medical services. This area is very fertile. They produce a lot of foodstuffs, but because of the conflict, they were not able to go and sell their food on the market. So trade was not taking place. When I saw the situation and somebody who was in charge of finding solutions, I said, these people are better off, the IDPs that is, are better off back to their homes. And that is where now I started the process of reconciling the 2 communities. So my conceptualization of reconciliation among these two groups was I wanted to find a lasting solution to the problems affecting the two communities in the conflict so that they can peacefully coexist again. And the starting point was to understand how the IDPs were evicted from their homes. So I had a series of meetings where they shared under what circumstances they left. Then they sent me to their neighbors to go and find out why they evicted their neighbors. So I went there and had a series of meetings. So for me, I came to learn later that I was facilitating reconciliation. Now, when I entered in a class of peace building, years later, that I was supporting reconciliation among these communities. Now, to the strategies. Reflecting back, what strategies did I use that I found very useful? I have explained one already. We found the right moment. The donor fatigue, lack of food in the camps, the market was not functioning. And so we were tired and the conflict was tired. So the two groups then were able, or they were ready to sit together and discuss the conflict they were experiencing. Another strategy that I used, I came from what now I used to call the victim, we used to call the victim community. So my community was among the people who were evicted. And going back to start the facilitation process from the area that we were evicted, I needed somebody to front. And so I came to learn later, I identified a young man whom I used to work with in the camp. I knew he was from this community, he was respected, and I asked him, can he help me get the youths who were still staging attacks and retreating in the camps to the negotiating table? So a critical yeast, the way we understand in peace building, was very important. He helped me to get the youths to the negotiating table from the perpetrator community or from the offenders community. Now, having gotten the youths to the negotiating table, this is the time again we could not openly discuss about ethnic clashes. The government did like that. So coming from the church, we used development as an entry point in terms of coming up with the question for discussion. And the question was, how were youths involved in development and if they faced any challenges? I knew that the first challenge they were going to highlight maybe were clashes. And so when we came to coming up with strategies on how to intervene in the challenges, I knew that the chance of discussing the ethnic clashes were very high. So that was another strategy that I used. And so, again, I had to front somebody. As much as I prepared everything, I came from one of the groups that was in conflict, and I needed time to buy trust from these young people. So there is no way I was just going to facilitate this meeting. But I took one of my colleagues I was working with, who was a man, and I fronted him. Why? Because he was a man. Second, because he did not come from the three communities that were in conflict. And this worked well for us. And so again, I was a young woman, and looking at the youths, in Africa, we have strong initiation process. They could not listen to a young woman who was only 29 years old. And so during the introduction, I told them my place was going to be in the kitchen. That is where they expected me to be. So after the preliminaries, I picked a jug of water, pretending to go to the kitchen, but actually I listened to the proceedings by the window. And each time I wanted to make a point, I came with a jug of water. As I poured to the next glass, even if it was half full, I made my point. The third day, the young people realized that actually I was making good points and they invited me. I had gained their trust. So I came to call this soft power. I used soft power as a young woman, and later I became their darling. They even offered to give me land to go and plant onions. I wish I had accepted. Now, after the sessions with the youths, they accepted to meet with their neighbors who were in the camps. And when we started joint meetings, I had to bring the government leaders on board and made them to co-chair, because I knew most of the solutions had to do with the government. And so they embraced that and they accepted to co-chair. I respected our culture and its role in reconciliation as a strategy. And during meetings, I used to invite a woman from the survivor community from the camp to open the meeting with prayer. And instead of praying, she could start a Christian lamentation song. And before we realized, we were all crying and mourning with her. When we finished the meeting, I invited a young man from, by then, the perpetrator community to close a meeting with prayer. He prayed, he didn't sing, but instead of addressing the meeting, he addressed God and lamented the structural injustices this marginalized community had to go through. And that time we could all fidget in our chairs, especially the government officials. And at the end, they could tell me, Tecla, please, can we just start the meeting without prayer? But I knew we needed to grieve. I knew that was the only way those women could pass the message, because they could not face the government officials directly. And that worked very well. Then I had respect for our culture. I knew that in our culture, once you have been in conflict and you've shed blood, you cannot share in the common meal. So during tea time, we used to have donuts. We call them mandasis, but I used to put them in 3 pots. And I could watch each group congregating in their own space. Then there was one in the middle that as facilitators used, but I used to fill it. With the time, I noticed they started to pick from this common pot. Then I realized that they may have gone through the cleansing rituals and they were able now to eat together. And I realized that was the moment that reconciliation was happening. Those are the strategies that I used. Now, when it comes to the impact of reconciliation on the reconciler as an individual and collective well-being, I will start with the positive impact. It led to my personal transformation. It has been a journey of 30 years with a few stops, a few turns, but towards the same destiny. This is where I started This was my first class in the field of peace building, conflict transformation. As I listened to the stories, I got to understand our situation better. For a long time, I thought that my community were victims, survivors, that they were just evicted. But when I listened to the stories, I realized that my neighbors were equally victims. This time, though we were victims of direct violence, but they were victims of structural violence perpetuated by administrative structures, which had most of the staff there from my community. This is what politicians manipulated for us to fight their war. And that is how I understood that the line between the victim and the community in intra-conflict is really blurred. Listening to their stories, I was able to ascend from my ethnic cocoon, from my ethnic space, to be able to look at the situation objectively and to support it in more effective way. And it was at that moment that I got the urge to even understand the dynamics of conflict. Because while I thought we were victims, they were perpetrators, I was looking at the symptoms. I had not looked at the issues deeply and the root causes. And that is why I got the urge to continue studying so that I could get to understand. Having understood, I became the devil's advocate for our community. I helped them to understand our own role in the conflict, and that facilitated reconciliation very well. Those were the positive. How about the negative impact? Physically, I was exposed to danger as I traveled to go in the field. I could not pass through the way. When I go, I could not come back through the same way. Fear that our vehicle could come across light weapons and blow up. 1991, 92, 93, 94, that is the time when HIV was very high in Africa. I had to wear a diaphragm. In the situation that I'm raped, I could not contract HIV. Because the government rejected being an island of peace and being a UN headquarters, they denied that we had clashes. And so I was in the bad books with the government. Emotionally, as I was listening to their stories, I was impacted, but I did not have someone to talk to. I could not talk to my husband because he could ask me to stop the work. My boss in the office only cared about the results. I did not have somebody to journey with me emotionally. And that is how I went back. I went down with vicarious trauma. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those powerful illustrations and examples, both from Rhoda and Dr. Tecla. We're so grateful for you sharing your experience. And I'm particularly energized by this presentation, thanks to the incredible student-led team and work of the Mary Hook Center for Reconciliation. I just want to say bravo to you and this work. It's really important. It is cutting edge and it's necessary for our field. I think what becomes clear to me when I'm listening to the research as well as the stories is that we are at a critical juncture. conflict has always been complex, but I think we have a new form of complexity that we're facing in our globalized community and in the realm where information is so easily transferred across the globe and through social media and so on. We are in a place where the conflicts have become not only complex, but complicated. And it seems to me that this work, beginning to understand insider reconcilers and their incredible role and function, and how to resource and support them in their work, is an absolutely important bridge to understanding peace building and conflict as systems of conflict and systems that are changing and in flux. And who better can help us understand the system and respond than those within the system? It takes a lot more effort from the outside to try to understand a system. It takes a lot more time, a lot more effort, and often we get it wrong. And so when I think about these systems, I think about emergent adaptive systems, which we in the field are beginning to apply this work to. And these are systems that we have to understand the containers of the system. What holds the system? What is the form? What is the structure? Who can best understand that but the people inside who are living within that structure, within that container? They see it on a daily basis. They can identify it and say, hey, these are the parts of the structure or the container or the form that need to change. The second part of the system is to understand the differences that we have been told that may keep a system going. A destructive system may continue because of these differences, or we're being told by social narratives that certain differences in the system are unreconcilable. But it's the insiders, the insider reconcilers, who can understand these differences and these relationships. And that's tied to the idea that all of these systems, a conflict system especially, has reciprocities. Sometimes these reciprocities are, these exchanges are for destruction. Sometimes they're for constructive means. But once again, I want to propose that the insider reconciler is the best to understand these exchanges. They are in fact involved in those exchanges. Those exchanges and reciprocities are the ways they stay alive, the way they stay active, the way they work for well-being. They have to maneuver and negotiate those exchanges and those reciprocities every day. And so when we think about it that way, we think about the incredible resource that the insider reconcilers are, like we've heard today. The incredible approach that they take to see the community as not only deficits, but assets. They don't only see the negative of the conflict, they see where are people doing incredible work. They also see inclusion as necessary. We heard the gender dynamics in both of these stories. We heard Tecla talking about the youth and how to bring the youth in, and then both of them how to bring in the patriarchy and the culture of men, that where the decision-making was still the focus at that point. And they did it with incredible creativity. I must say the embedded creativity of insiders is we cannot underestimate that. We cannot necessarily even replicate that. And so I'm just enthralled, and I'm remembering many insider peace builders and reconcilers that I have seen, worked with, heard their stories in the past. But I'm also aware that we want to hear some of the questions that folks may have from the participants who are here for our two invited panelists guests. And so I'm going to turn that over and see if you have questions. Please place those in the Q&A so that we can then turn those over to our esteemed panelists to respond to. So if you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A. Please put your questions in there that you might have from the audience. I do want to say we have some flexibility for this process. We're aware that folks will need, those who have planned to leave at 11 will be free to do that. If there is interest to carry on, we can also negotiate that at this point. And I just want to acknowledge those who are in the audience, the participants. We have a great group, and some of them are familiar, particularly my good friend and great insider peace builder reconciler, Jean-Claude Nkundwa from Burundi, who's worked in Burundi and Rwanda and Chad and many other places. It's so wonderful to see your name. I'll go ahead and jump in if there's not questions coming from our audience. Let me say to the panelists again, thank you so much. And you've answered a number of really critical questions about your role. We saw it in example and how the insider role is so important to sustain reconciliation. I guess my question for you right now would be, how is reconciliation sometimes feels like a foreign concept to you, and then other times you see it as a really important indigenous process that you know and recognize. This challenge of our globe and the outsider insider trying to define or enact reconciliation, when do you see that clashing? When have you seen that clashing in your experience? And I would love for Tecla or Rhoda to jump in if either of you have an example, a short incidents. The other question, if you want to give some time to think on that, is what is the one message that you would want to send to external organizations, facilitators, resources, that you would want to send to them to say, this is how we could use your help. We don't want you to define how we can use your help. This is what we need. This is how you can accompany us. This is how you can walk alongside of us. Maybe that's an easier one. We'd love to hear that statement, that framed message that you would like to give.
Reconciliation, I think, has been professionalized, but conflict is as old as humanity. And before I entered into a classroom to learn about reconciliation conflict, I knew that communities have been in conflict. And for us, the people who usually intervene in that conflict to start the reconciliation process, in some places they are elders. In other places, it could be, if it's interpersonal, it could be a respected person from the community who commands respect. Where I see maybe the difference is the way reconciliation is a journey, and a process can really take so long. But when we have people coming to mediate from outside and they have time bound, we have to do this by this. That is where I see the conflicting. I think the process should start and the process should guide the process until we come to the solution. But I see a lot of hurrying when it comes to the modern ways of reconciliation. And reconciliation, for us, we've not compartmentalized. This is problem solving, this is reconciliation, this is conflict analysis. For us, it's really, as I said, it's a problem solving. And you move from one problem solving, you go to the next. For example, when I allowed the women to mourn instead of praying, I was dealing with emotional trauma healing. And unless we release that emotions, reconciliation cannot take place. So we don't divorce that this time we are doing trauma healing. This time we are doing problem solving. This time we are doing conflict analysis. This time we are doing reconciliation. For me, I see it's a journey and it could start anywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Dr.
I
Tecla.
think
Rowda.
just to add more, what Tecla said is just the case I presented. I feel insider to my knowledge of the cultural context, but also I feel outsider with the specific situations, such as the case I presented. Also, that emotions and personalizing some of the stories also need some sort of skills to play that role. So specifically with the reason I was there to campaign as a female, and I went to get seat as a parliament member, all the negative perceptions against the women in the region, but also here you were asked to be involved in a very serious case. So just to kind of wait and fit and see and where you can fit on this situation. Also, what's draining more is once you get involved, you have to kind of know how to use your boundaries, and also you could be trapped up with this kind of situations because it needs more and more work. As of today, like the people from the other side of the clan, I just made it a short-term intervention for one clan, while I have to now be still involved. And I don't know when all those cases will be closed because there is a prior history of killings between the clans. It's just, so you have to differentiate and you really have to be careful and draw a line in between.
Thank you very much. We understand if you'll need to leave this space right now. There is one question that from the audience, and we'd love to give the last word to Auntie to close up our time here. So if you're able to stay on for a few more minutes, we'll try to close this in about 5 minutes. Enrico Nathaniel asks this question: what's the biggest challenge in taking part of conflict resolution? Does any of you have to do a survey to the conflict area in order to find out the root causes of the problem?
Thank you so much for that question. But before I answered it, you asked, that is why you asked earlier, what is one thing that we need to call out? One thing I want to call out is that reconciliation needs to be facilitated. And it's a journey. The facilitation really takes time. The facilitation needs resources. Maybe pay transport for people to come, buy them tea or buy them soda. Some of us are community-centered peace and development workers, but that does not mean that we also have needs. Unfortunately, where we work in the rural areas, and at times we use quiet diplomacy. Our work is not even known there unless you get closer. So we just want to call on partners to join with us financially, or even just being there to encourage us. Concerning the challenge of conflict resolution, understanding the root causes of conflict, for me, listening was really key. Bringing the groups in, listening to both groups, individually, one group, separately, then bringing them together. And you don't, when you are working in Africa, don't just listen to what somebody stands there to narrate. Listen to the poems, listen to the songs, listen to the prayers. Then you will really get to understand the root causes. And thank God nowadays we have tools that you can engage the groups to help you understand the root causes, like when you are dealing with the symptoms and root causes, the conflict tree. But let the people in conflict themselves, give them a chance to analyze that, then you will get to understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
To answer that question briefly, I will say the well-being of the peacemakers. It's very important and critical, as Tecla talked about bringing together with a group of people, and herself or other colleagues that we have in Somalia being involved, such kind of gathering also can impact on them. So thinking about the well-being of the peacemakers and that will be the very serious challenging that needs to be addressed.
Thank you both. I'm gonna put one last question out because I think it's an interesting one. I don't think it has to be a long response, maybe a quick response. It might be quite complicated, but let me just put it out there. But this question is very important. And the audience asks, can you justify foreign intervention when there's an endless conflict in any country?
Yes. Foreign intervention, yes, but with the support of the local. And where the trust is very low, at times, the foreign intervention boosts that confidence. And once the confidence has been boosted, it will be good to work with the local support structures for sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rowda?
Rowda.
Thank you, Tecla. And yes, I think you both yes, it's justified or no. It depends how some interventions can also be harmful, and some international organizations, they come on the ground just to take the boxes of delivering some of the work, especially when we are talking about trauma healing. I think I made many speeches about the peacemakers who are taking the path of adding component of trauma healing to their work. Sometimes they might cause more harm than good because of re-traumatizing the participants without having the competency it needs to deliver those kind of things. But that's just one aspect. But I think it's very
I'm sorry, Rowda, I think we lost your connection.
and it has to be those who are really willing to understand the cultural context has to be involved.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. This has been a very rich and important engagement. I'm going to turn it now to my good brother, Antti, to give any closing remarks. And thank you for those who stayed a little bit longer to keep this conversation going.
Thank you for the call. And I text the students on our chat that they've made me so super proud that this humble intuition has been and is being shaped into science. This has been one of the most gratifying webinars or events that I have attended, just to observe how well they're doing that. But Carl, you and I have much larger challenge, which is communicating this knowledge into the policy level and the funding level. We've always known, you and I, because we've seen these people on the work who are the heroes, the true heroes who are transforming. Unfortunately, that understanding has not been shared. That's why we need some science, but we also need some tough, hardcore policy. The beauty of this is that the peace building world and peace mediation world is broken. And I think there's more and more acknowledgement that we're not getting the results done by this Western mediator type of approach. We have to recognize that the real understanding and efforts are happening in the ground, but they can only succeed, like you indicated, when the policy framework is in support of and the funding streams are not taken by international organizations and used, like Tecla said, with their own time frame that doesn't support the peace itself. So we owe these efforts and the next steps because of the work that the insiders are doing. And Tecla and Rowda, you always make me so proud. It's so honor to know you and have this chance to continue to work with you. And all of those in the call, I'm calling for you to be an insider reconciler in Burundi. And I know that many of you are engaging this work. Be our heroes in your community, and subscribe to MHCR in case you want to be inspired by this work and get some ideas. Follow the podcast Cam has been creating with called Routes to learn from it, and share your insights. Get in touch with us and share when you have beautiful case studies to share, so we can amplify your work. Thank you, everybody. Happy weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Belle, did you want to pop in for one last thing?
I just wanted to say that Rowda's and Tecla's stories are very powerful. And I wanted to say that a lot of the things they were saying, they're already coming up in those 10 interviews that we're analyzing. And I'm so glad. It means we're in the right direction.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. MHCR staff, please go do something fun. Go take your weekend. Go enjoy it. I'll see y'all soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.